In 1963, I'm 4. I remember the water fountains. I remember the fact that you couldn't vote. I remember all of the discrimination that went on. And for me, it's always been when there's something wrong, the question is, how do you like to see it changed? Like I said, I'm a nerd. You know what I like watching? I like watching Jeopardy. Matter of fact, I still go to my parents' house and sit down with my mom, and if I get stuff right, oh, my baby, he's so smart. You know, it's not Hercules. It's more like Einstein. But the whole point was, what I like about Jeopardy is they give you the answer. You have to ask the right question. So if you look at it that way, whenever there is a problem, the question is, what is the solution? Focus on the solution, and the problem goes away. Hi, I'm Alvin Jones, and I am a culture builder. Well, it's interesting when I was young, and parents, be very careful what you tell your kids when they were young. Um, People told me I was smart. And so when someone tells you that you're smart, you act that way. Recently, my cousin Jeff was talking to my mom, and she was asking him questions about me when I was young. He said, yeah, he was like 2 years old. He could read, he could see this, he could, remember stuff. And so having that ability, but more importantly, having someone who would foster. My mother was a teacher, so she saw that and she pulled it out of me. And one of the things that I've come to realize, being a talented person is a curse. I've seen young folks that are brilliant, and people go, I can't believe. No, let them. There are people who have gifts. Let them have their gift. Let them be that way. And like I said, there's some people who want to do things that are not in the well of what that demographic or that nationality or that culture says is supposed to happen, but it's there for a reason. So I want everybody to find that gift. And sometimes we walk away from the gift. I remember going to see the movie Lion King, and they had the premiere in Washington, D.C., and it was the Uptown Theater on Connecticut Avenue, which is right down the street from the National Zoo. So that's where the pandas were at the time. And there was an after party, and I got a chance to meet Chief Marin, but I also talked to Michael Eisner. He was the head of Disney. And he says, what do you think about the movie? I said, actually, it's a very good teaching tool for inner city youth. He says, what do you mean? I said, well, think about it. The music was African. The voices of people were African. What it talked about was the inheritance. Mufasa was saying to Simba, this will be yours one day. But you also understand in the hood, there are some great things. There was a song by Tavares. So I have a musical Tourette syndrome, so I can either find a song or create a song. But I think Tavares was from Chicago. It was a song called Hardcore Poetry. It depends on who's coming to tenement streets, whether he's coming home or passing through. You can walk the streets and find so much to criticize, but that's the easy thing to do because there's beauty in the concrete if your ears to the ground. Only non-believers will never hear the sound. This is a song not necessarily sweet. I pass it on to those I may never meet. And if my words don't make history, just call it hardcore poetry. And so what you found in The Lion King, Simba was supposed to ascend. His father, Mustafa, explained that to him and set him up for that. Mustafa also knew what was going on with his brother Scar, that element of the hood that goes to that dark side. And what happened was Scar did psychological warfare. He made Simba feel that he was responsible, and Simba felt shame and walked away. And so there's some times where we have pain and we feel shame. We feel that we're not worthy. And actually what we do, not only do we walk away from our destiny, we walk away from what we were supposed to do for all mankind. So when Simba walked away and Scar took over, if you notice, that whole village went into decline. And Simba was nursing his pain. And because he was dealing with his pain, he couldn't help other folks. And it was funny because in his pain, when he found with Tuman and the other, yeah, Pumbaa, yeah, he had friends. And these guys didn't know he didn't know he was supposed to be a king or whatever. He's just this guy we meet, and he's kind of cool. And we just kicking it. We're having fun. We're doing this, having fun. Hey, man, don't worry about it. Kula Patata. We're just having fun. Don't worry. And Simba found friends who didn't know what he did, didn't care what he did. They just dealt with him for him. But here's what's interesting. It wasn't until Nala came when she was great, eat his buddy, he stood up and roared. And what he realized, this is no longer about me. This is my friend. I'm going to protect my friend. And what was interesting, he realized it was Nyla. She's like, yo, I know you. We grew up like this. You're not there. And because you're not there, this whole community is going down. You need to come back home and take care of your community. Well, I don't know. Boy, I've known you since you were a little cub. I remember your father held you up to the sun and to the moon. This is where you belong. It's not just about you, it's about the whole community. And so when you look at that, it's like, how many Simbas do we have? How many people do we have who may have felt that, yeah, this is a little too tough for me? And sometimes they gotta, like I said, I guess you wonder where I've been. I search to find a love within. Because as I go to where we are in hip hop, we are hearing the pain, but now we got to get that redemption. What did Bob Marley say about the redemption song? You know, it's going to be a bright, sunshiny day. Don't worry about a thing. Don't worry, be happy. So this is what I see. I see us getting to that point, and it's needed. The timing is right. George Clinton says, no one can hold back someone whose time has come, and us is what time it is. So I was 4 years old in 1963 when the March on Washington happened. And it was one of the biggest gatherings in the name of civil rights for people of color, especially black folks. 250,000 people gathered. Dr. King, Martin Luther King Jr., was one of the speakers. You heard about the I Have a Dream speech, but there were other people there. A. Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin. If you just saw the movie Bayard Rustin, it tells the story about how Bayard put all of that stuff together, but because he was gay, they kind of moved him out of the way. Because if you think people being gay and LGBTQ was bad, now think about the 60s. You couldn't even vote if you were black. So if you were black and gay, that was just, in some people's eyes, an abomination. But that whole piece, being young, seeing what was going on, what could happen. Because I remember when black folks couldn't vote. I remember when if they tried to march, dogs would be sicked on them and fire hoses and the whole 9 yards. So in 1963, I'm 4. I remember the water fountains. I remember the fact that you couldn't vote. I remember all of the discrimination that went on. And for me, it's always been when there's something wrong, the question is, how do you like to see it changed? Like I said, I'm a nerd. You know what I like watching? I like watching Jeopardy. Matter of fact, I still go to my parents' house and sit down with my mom, and if I get stuff right, oh, my baby, he's so smart. It's not Hercules. It's more like Einstein. But the whole point was, what I like about Jeopardy is they give you the answer. You have to ask the right question. So if you look at it that way, whenever there is a problem, the question is, what is the solution? Focus on the solution, and the problem goes away. It wasn't until maybe 10, 15 years ago that I realized, oh, this was what my purpose in life was. It was my cousin's birthday, and they were talking about the fact that they went to the March on Washington. And at that time, I was 4 years old. This is 1963. And my parents went, and my cousins, Lamont and Selena and Gilbert and Barbara, they all went to the March on Washington. I stayed with my cousin Sylvia. And I'm watching this on TV. And, back then they had black and white TV, so it was maybe a 9-inch TV. And I'm watching it, and they're talking about there's 250,000 people there. And I'm trying to see if I can find my parents in that 250,000 people. Can I see my mommy and my daddy? And I'm only 4 years old at this time. But then, like I said, 15 years ago, I realized that March on Washington basically that was the date that my purpose in life was discovered. I realized a couple of things. Number one, the power of media. And secondly, the need to get involved in things that are bigger than you. So for me, media has always been that way. Growing up, I realized athletes and entertainers are the ones that are the positive role models. And if you think about it, the March on Washington, you had people like Harry Belafonte there. You had people like Lena Horne and Marian Anderson and folks like that. Wasn't Marian, it was the other gospel singer. Matter of fact, she was the one that told Dr. King to do The Dream. Because if you go back and if you go back and review the March on Washington, it wasn't just about that dream. It was the March on Washington for jobs and equality. And Dr. King was one of the speakers, and that was put together by Bayard Rustin. And I'm so glad last year that they did the documentary. And of course, Chicago's own, Michelle and Barack Obama were behind that so you could tell that story. And A. Philip Randolph was a part of that also. So then you had it where, there's the Mary, I'm trying to think, the gospel singer, it'll come to me, but while Dr. King was talking about the sweltering heat of injustice, while he was talking about the paycheck mark insufficient funds, if you really think about it, Dr. King was tearing into America's ass. It's kind of like, you were supposed to do this, you jive turkey, y'all said you're supposed to be about freedom and equality, you're not doing it. And so then she says, Mahalia Jackson says, tell him about the dream. And that's when he went into I Have the Dream. So it wasn't even scripted. It just was off of that. And so you start looking at the need to get involved. You start looking at the struggle. You start thinking about, so I remember when there were segregated water fountains and things like that. But I knew that media would be the place that you go to make those changes. So you start listening to music, to Say It Loud, I'm Black and Proud. People get ready, there's a train coming. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is going to come. All of those songs were a part of what it needed. Yeah, even songs like You Can't Hurry Love, You Can't Have to Wait. And Love, I'm going to Make You Love Me. All of these songs that were telling us, giving us this guideline, this soundtrack. Think about when Marvin Gaye did What's Going On. Amazing that people were able to resonate with that. So I wanted to get into media. My first DJ job was in high school, DeVal High School, class of 77. I wanted to get into this, so I said, I'm going to see if I can do the morning announcements. So, good morning, ding dong. Used to have a little glockenspiel, ding dong, please stand for the morning announcements. As I said, I'm a nerd. So I realized they had, in that console, a turntable and a AM/FM receiver. So what I did, I figured out how to use the turntable. So instead of the glockenspiel, ding dong, you may hear the beginning of Earth, Wind, and Fire. Shining Star, or the beginning of The Emotions, Best of My Love. Boom. So that was me just being able to be creative, to take those juices. So I always tell people, we are all creators because we were created by the Creator. If God made man in his image, man and woman, and he created us, and we're in his image, we are creators also. And so that's the whole thing about being creative. Now, here's what I also find out. Sometimes in that process of creating, our energy goes and we get burnt out. And it's like, oh man, I can't think of anything. I can't be creative. I tell people, just go off, go play. Go hang out, go check out the sunshine. In other words, do some recreation so that you can recreate. And some of these things are just so simple. But so what I realized, I wanted to go to Los Angeles because that's where Hollywood. So I said, if I can get to university, of California, Los Angeles, or USC, I'm going to go there. And then we had a substitute teacher, Oscar Pendleton, Mr. Pendleton. And he was telling me, oh, man, you can go to Howard University. Howard University, yeah, they got a radio station. Because I had listened to WHUR. It was unusual because WHUR was the first that I know of commercial radio station owned by a college. That's because Katharine Graham gave the station to Howard University as the training facility. So we had that. And he had mentioned, because Tony Brown, with Tony Brown's Journal, was the head of TV and communications for Howard. And he was saying all these things they were going to build. So I'm like, okay, I want to do this. I'm going to stay here. And I did. And I remember, because Howard University was a private school, their tuition was more. And so when I talked to my parents, they're like, well, you got accepted to the University of Maryland, you got accepted to BUA, you got accepted to Morgan State. This is more expensive. I said, well, I really want to go to Howard. So I tell you what, I won't stay on dorm. I'll stay here. And at that time, the metro wasn't running, so it would normally take me like 2 hours to get home, but I didn't care. Started working at WHBC, which was the carrier current station. And basically it was an AM station, but the transmitters were only in the basement of each dorm. And you could only hear it from the dorm or outside. Had a chance to get on the radio. And it was funny because the one thing about Howard University, it's got a good tradition, but man, we used to have good parties. So right before school started, you had the dance in the valley, and everybody's hanging out. And then they had a dance in the women's gym, and I'm sitting on the stairs in the women's gym, and this guy, Will Allen, tells me he works at WHUR. I'm like, WHUR? Oh my goodness. I wanted to work at WHUR because I remember when they first signed on in 1971, and I heard Shaft and stereo on FM. And if back in the days, if you were listening to AM, it was, I'm like, wow. And he says, yeah, I'm going to be on the air tomorrow between 12 and 5. Why don't you come by? I'm like, really? So Will let me come in, and I'm sitting there, and I'm watching all of this stuff. And if you ever worked at a radio station or ever been to a radio station, just to sit there and watch the DJ, because back then they had turntables. So one table is filling out, and then he hits the button, he talks, and he does this, and he hits the cart machine, and he has to read the meters, and all this stuff's going on, and the phones are calling, people calling in, and the ladies, hey, Will, how you doing? And I'm like sitting there, and I'm just enjoying this. I'm a freshman. Classes haven't even started. And I say to myself, by my senior year, I'm going to be on that radio station. And then I was able to get on to WHBC. Folks that were senior of me, they taught me how to get my third-class license with the broadcast endorsement. And then I went on to qualify for a program with WHUR. And because the station was given to Howard University by Katharine Graham, and it was a commercial station. During the week, of course, they had full-time AFTRA members, and students were trying to get on. And some of the students in the School of Communication said, hey, if you don't put us on the air, we're going to FCC, and we're going to challenge your license. So they had to create this whole new program. But that whole new program had changes. You had to be a junior or senior to go on the radio, which means as I'm coming up as a sophomore, I wasn't going to be able to get on. So I went to Ted Roberts. Ted Roberts was the head of radio and TV film, and I asked for an override. And Ted gave me that override. Now, that changed my life because there was the Quiet Storm. So the whole Quiet Storm format created by Melvin Lindsey. Wonderful guy, Miss Melvin. He was a mentor. He was a gentleman. I learned so much from him. But I found out about Melvin Lindsey and the Quiet Storm when I was in high school. I go to one of my best friend's house, and we're sitting there. We'd play pool or chess or ping pong, and he's telling me about the Quiet Storm. I'm like, oh, cool. So if you have a honey over, you don't have to get up and turn the album over. You just let the music play. And so Melvin had come back. Well, Melvin graduated in 77, so that was the same year I graduated from high school. So Melvin left, started working with NBC. Don Roberts came in, and Don was doing the show on the weekends. And so when I came in, I was going to be doing the overnight. So Sheila Eldridge, who I work with now with Cafe Mocha Radio and TV, she left WHUR from 7 to midnight to go out to L.A. That opened up that 7 to midnight. Kathy Hughes, of course, with TV One and Radio One. She's the one that gave the show the name Quiet Storm because she heard Melvin. He was just quiet like a storm. Boom. So she called Melvin and said, hey, Melvin, you want to come in and do Monday through Friday? So there you go, Monday through Friday, Melvin Lindsey in the Quiet Storm in fall of 77, Don Roberts on the weekend. So when fall of 78 came in, I'm working overnights. Well, my show was called In the Nighttime. I took the music from Michael Henderson. So I'm learning from Don what this thing is about, the Quiet Storm. It's about reaching. It's not just playing records. It's about telling a story. It's about giving your personality. So when Don left to go down to Norfolk, and actually he just retired. He did news, a wonderful, successful career with NBC down in news. That position came open and I got it. So had Ted Roberts not let me override, if I had to wait another year, that Quiet Storm position would have never gone to me. And so I look at that. And I had a chance to sit in for Melvin Lindsey, the guy who created Quiet Storm. So Quiet Storm was never about just throwing love songs on. It was about creating a mood. It's about finding music that creates that mood. So whenever Melvin went on vacation, Melvin would call me, hey, just let you know I'm going on vacation. I'm like, okay, cool. That means I get to sit in Monday through Friday for the Quiet Storm. So I'm doing Saturday, Sunday, Monday through Friday, and then Saturday. I got 9 days. Plus working during the week, I get after money. So I'm like, cool. I get paid and visibility. But it told me two things that I really cherish. Number one, Melvin called me to sit in for him because he trusts me with his show. But also, he also had trust in me. Because a lot of times if someone sits in, everybody wants to, if you remember the movie All About Eve, that understudy, that replacement's the person who wants to take you out. But to me, I was just honored to work with Melvin. And so working with the Quiet Storm and the Reputation, that got me the job at BT. Hey, I'm Alvin Jones. Welcome. You are experiencing 247hh.com.